I'll just go on.
Absolutely.
Okay, my name is Petra Bierbach, and I'm the CEO of PAS. PAS is an organization as a charity, is also a social enterprise. And I would like to talk about a little bit about what's happening in Scotland right now with the new Planning Act that's coming into being. And as you know, planning in the nations is devolved. So Scotland's planning system is different from England's planning system, and that makes it quite interesting to what's happening right now. Is quite a nice way of linking much better the planning system with public sector finance and also community well-being. These are now in the portfolio of our new planning minister. So next slide, please. So what I would like to talk about is the charity and the social enterprise. We are now in our 26th year, actually, and we help primarily individuals and community groups to get involved, more involved, proactively involved in the planning system, because too often people hear about planning when it's actually quite late and something has been decided, and then people feel that's quite, it becomes then very reactive. So what we have been seeing over the last few years is a change in that. I was on the planning reform group to help changing our system. So what we are seeing now is a much more greater move towards what's called on the right-hand side, local place plans. And I want to talk a little bit more in detail about that. But we are volunteer-led. So primarily our volunteers are planning professionals. We also have urban designers, transport engineers, everybody who is actually active in the planning, in the place agenda. So as I said here, in the last 12 months, about 400 volunteers have given 3 years of worth of time, skills and experience to community groups. Again, it's very important to note that we are also impartial and independent. So the views we represent are the views of the community that we're working with. Next slide, please. For us, we are very much involved in the mantra of Patrick Geddes, which is often seen as the first town planner. And we talk about place, work, folk. It's very important for us that we're connecting the place with the people that live there and also with what they're doing there, whether it's working, economic activities, or going about and having a nice leisure time. It is about connecting. So for us, places means choices about place is choices about people. Next slide. So I think I want to just quickly touch on that because we have now seen a reevaluation of the experience of our place. So the pandemic has changed the experience very rapidly, and we've seen that over the last 18 months. And I think Lenka touched on it a bit earlier when she said we suddenly see ourselves connecting people from Orkney, Shetland with people from Dumfriesshire. So the whole is together without the pandemic, this would not have been possible. So this has really changed how we view place. There's a rapid and radical change to the experience. It has an impact on mental and physical health and well-being. And of course, we also heard and seen exacerbation of inequalities, those that have and those that have not. And it really makes a huge amount in terms of what kind of places we're going to see in the future. I was delighted when I saw young children cycling on the roads, reclaiming the roads for themselves, which was a real highlight during the pandemic. But equally, I was also frustrated by people who didn't have access to green spaces and who were not able to walk about as well as some other parts. And of course, also the infrastructure is not equally distributed. So we have some communities in Scotland who don't have the same access to broadband and the same infrastructure. So this really we have to address that. So there's lots more to do. And I think, again, what's happening now in Scotland also, we are featuring a new 20-minute neighbourhood where we want to see people more walking, cycling, and have their shops and parks nearby. So really moving away from the car, that's quite an important aspect for the next few stages. Next, please. So we're also talking about looking at a well-being economy. What does that look like for Scotland? Again, policy is often framed in terms of human and ecological well-being, not just simply economic growth. And I think there's a real appetite for that now happening in terms of more ecological well-being. We're seeing that, but also more human well-being. And that, of course, addresses the term, the intergenerational living that we talk about later on. So business really provide dignified lives for their employees, and there needs to be, then we also have to meet social needs. And by business, I also mean organizations like ours, our own third sector, but also public sector. Okay, so there's a shift from us versus them to we are all in this together. Sounds maybe good, but I think we will actually, by working together, we will achieve that. Next slide. We have in Scotland a place standard. We have used this a lot in our organization as a starting point to create meaningful conversations about place. And what I really particularly like, and why we have adopted it in its entirety, the place standard tool is really a well-being app. It's really something that you can have. It doesn't just look at places from an architectural or from a planner point perspective, but it actually looks at it in terms of well-being and how do we feel about our place. And the feeling is very, very important in this. So the place standard can help communities to develop their own understanding of place and start the conversation, because it is important that it's people's own understanding and feeling about place features in their decision making in the future. So again, we have used the place standard extensively for many years, and also in terms of when we're working with young people, when we're working with different communities, for example, Gypsy Traveller community, place standard is a very good opening tool to start the conversation. Next slide. So the new Planning Scotland Act 2019, which is coming to fruition hopefully by the end of this year or next year in all its details, has a number of very key topics. On the first thing is the national planning framework and local development plans. There's now a much greater requirement to consider the needs of older people and also include the voices of children and young people. The UN Charter of the Rights of the Child has just been incorporated into Scots law, and that means young people must be involved in decisions that affect them. And of course, place and how we build and how we go about affects young people. Then we have a whole new tier of planning, which I would call the most democratic aspect of the new act, and that is the local place plan, which is basically localized level of planning and is to be led by the community, not by the authority, local authority, not by the professionals, but by the community coming forward with their ideas, but obviously having to be aware of where the local development plan is and also be aware of the national planning framework. Within a national planning framework, I should also add, there's a new aspect on community well-being and also climate emergency. So national planning framework is more than just infrastructure provider. It looks at much wider aspects now. And I think therefore it's much richer. And it's the first time that the National Planning Framework 4 will be discussed by the entirety of the Parliament, not just the Select Committee. So again, the whole parliamentarian will discuss the national plan for Scotland. And then of course the local place plan, as I said here, will also give us a focus on creating intergenerational places and spaces for community-led housing, which I think is a really good opportunity, and hopefully a lot will be done around that. Master plan consent area, again, that's very much a planning term, but basically it means that we have to have consent areas for master plans, and that is to include also self-built housing. So we're really seeing a shift away from the one fit all to many more providers coming forward now. And the self-built list, which is a requirement for planning authorities to prepare and maintain a list of anyone interested in acquiring land for self-building. And as you know, in Scotland, we have the Scottish Land Commission that is looking very much at how do we repurpose derelict and vacant land in Scotland, and they have provided a list of that. Next, please. So let me delve a little bit more into the local place plans because I'm so excited about that. It's a new tier of community-led plans. Any community body can prepare and submit a local place plan to the local planning authority. However, the community body is defined under the Community Empowerment Scotland Act 2015. It is a community controlled body or a community council. And more importantly, the plan should be co-produced with different groups. Again, you have to demonstrate that you have involved age groups. So it's not just a group of like-minded, you have to go beyond the groups that you normally work with and go to others that are living in the community and could benefit. So there is on the right-hand side, is exactly the kind of sets out the steps that you have to follow. So set the context, evidence gathering, research, having conversation and meetings. Then the visioning is the idea and proposal development, site identification, collaboration, shortlisting, and so on. And then prioritization as well. And then towards the action, the plan adaptation, delivery planning, and ongoing support. And that's, I think, very, very helpful. It also has to fit in, and you have to obviously involve your local planning authority, but also in terms of the Community Empowerment Act, it also is very good that you bring in your local neighborhood plans as well. Next one. So it's a new tier of community-led plans. It's a new type of plan, and it's envisaged that a local place plan is a proposal as to the development or the use of land. It may also identify land and buildings that the community body considers be of particular significance to the local area. And this links me back to my earlier point about the pandemic. We have seen huge mushrooming of empty and vacant buildings now. So it's quite important that the community can decide and find new purposes for the buildings, and that can lead to a whole new way of delivering housing for the future. But again, it's not the abstract. A local place plan must have regard to the local development plan and sets out the reasons why a local development plan should be amended. As I said before, it must have regard to the national planning framework. It must demonstrate it has had the views of the wider community, and of course also the views of the elected members. So there is really an opportunity for everyone, including organizations, to work much better together. And it may take a bit longer because, if you come into a common position, you will have to discuss. Next slide. So here are some forerunners of what we would term local place plans. We have worked with the Isle of Rum Community Land Use Plan in 2015, which was then subsequently adopted as by Highland Council, and because the development plan had already been put to rest, so it was adopted as a statutory guidance, and so it has now actual status. We also worked with the Upper Cross Community Land Use Upper Cross Community to produce the Community Land Use Plan in 2019, and more recently the Stromness Local Place Plan. Again, Orkney have adopted that, so has Upper Cross Highland Council again. There are huge opportunities. All these plans are available on our website, but there are real opportunities here for communities to be lead actors in the plan making process, plan for how they want a place to be in the future, and influence decision about land use, really putting communities in the driving seat. Next one. Lenka, thank you. I want to just quickly digress to another project that we're doing, which is community-led sustainable action plans, because I think it links very much with the 20-minute neighborhood that we all want to see more of. So it's about active travel action plans. It's across 9 locations in Scotland. It is to support economically disadvantaged or isolated communities in urban and rural Scotland. We want to see what is possible there to have the modal shift away from car use to but more sustainable transport and active travel opportunities, and is to develop evidence base around sustainable transport intervention. And where we have slightly a new way of doing it is by establishing community facilitators, providing training and support so that they can train the trainer, because I think communities like to work within their own communities, and we see that as a new way of supporting active volunteering as well. Next slide. So the community-led sustainable transport plan provide impartial technical knowledge, use the place standard tool, again, what I mentioned earlier, to initiate the conversations around place, raise awareness with decision makers, create intergenerational dialogue. Again, that's important because different age groups have different needs, and we need to encourage that dialogue. Seldom heard voices, it's a phrase that we like to adopt when we work with communities, because we have to reach out much more, we have to work much harder to reach the seldom heard, and to make sure that all the voices are involved. And of course, some of these action plans will, that was the whole idea, that actually feeds into the local place plan. So local place plan go beyond development. It's also about how you go about in place. So it's very much a holistic approach. Next slide. Then very quickly, I just want to quickly, because I know that Jan is there to talk about co-housing, but I just want to quickly say we're supporting community-led housing, because we do feel that homes are not housing units. They ought to be led by community needs. And it does involve a lot of very creative solutions. And I think I just want to quote that, co-housing is about an intentional community with shared interest, aspirations, and ethics that wants to leverage that in the physical space where the balance of privacy and communality is critical. And could I have the next slide, please? So community-led housing or co-housing in Scotland. In Sweden, it's co-housing represents about 18% of the total housing stock. In most of Europe, co-housing represents about 10%. In the UK, currently, it's 0.5% of the total housing stock. I think self-build is 50% of production housing. And I think, again, it's because we have a different finance structure on the continent, and I think that has helped for community housing to really become very much embedded. I should say, however, that the first co-housing or intentional community was actually in Scotland in 1939 in Camp Hill. Some of you may know that, and it's still going strong today. So I think it can be done, and it has longevity as well. Could I have the next slide, please? So community-led housing, there's example from elsewhere. Mehrgenerationenhäuser are multi-generational community centers. They are multi-generational community centers who are a key part in Germany's preventive health plan and now on the statute book. So these are the centers, but then you also have cohabitation. Some of these have developed further away from activities to actually also living into living quarters. So cohabitation can reduce the cost of care for the over 50s, and these statistics are available. But co-housing is also much more affordable and can benefit the young as well as the older generation. Could I have the next slide? I think I'm almost done now. I don't want to talk too much about New Haven because notice that Judith is here. So I just link her if you just go to the next slide. Thank you. So I've just have some questions for discussion. So how can we support communities to use local place plan to support co-housing and multi-generational facilities? And are our communities aware of co-housing as a viable alternative? And then again, when it comes to co-housing and multi-generational facilities, who is still missing from the conversation, and how can we help to speed up the process? And again, as I mentioned before, there are some real good hooks in the new Planning Act Scotland to support co-housing and the involvement of different generations in the planning system. But what else do we need to do beyond planning? I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Petra. That was an amazing introduction to the conversation today. And I think what you'll find is that what Petra has done perfectly is given an introduction to the next couple of presentations we're going to have. So we are now about to have Jan talking about Cohousing. And Jan, thank you very much for coming along at relatively short notice, much appreciated. And then after Jan, we're going to have a short break, and then we'll be hearing about Heart of New Haven. So Jan, over to you. Thank you.
Unmute myself immediately. Excuse me, and share my screen and see how that works. And here are my slides. Okay. So, everybody okay with seeing that?
Yep.
Right, okay. I really loved Petra's talk. It was absolutely fascinating and hit so many buttons of what we've been through and thinking about in co-housing. So it's really, really good. So my name's Jan and I'm from Choice, which is co-housing in Southern Scotland. And it's an organisation that I've been sort of informally part of for a while, but it actually started way back in 2016 with David Somerville being involved in starting it off, as some of you may know David, and Mike Wilson. And it's been a kind of informal group, and I've attended a few meetings where we've just heard experiences of co-housing from other areas, but not really done anything. But so I wasn't involved in the first alternative bid for Comiston in July 2018, and I wasn't really involved in the St Crispin's bid either, apart from attending a public meeting. But we were just really way off being informed and knowledgeable to really make a bid have an impact. And so Carla Holmes were successful and we weren't. So co-housing, as Petra's kind of summarized as well, is really a middle way. So an old alternative to like just having to like compete in the private housing market with people who've got so much money and where house prices are going up and up and up. And the other alternative being social housing, where you might not be eligible and there's not enough of that either. Then you've got generation rent and exorbitant rents and you know, not always good landlords. So social housing is something different, and it hits a lot of what Petra was talking about. But the basic importance of co-housing is the community of people who decide they want to like form a community. So they're involved in the design and the planning, and they involve the wider community as well by having common areas and opportunities to invite people in to, you know, use the common areas for things like, I don't know, play groups or meet up, you know, coffee mornings. And but the important things about co-housing is the intentional part, the benefit in terms of sustainability and affordability, because we're taking the profit. You know, the idea is homes should be to live in, not for making a profit out of. And I think in the UK generally, that is a concept that people are not very on board with. There are 5 principles of co-housing, which are summarized on this slide and the next one. Again, co-designed with people who are living there being involved in the design, and the common areas being an essential part of it, and the sharing of things like the laundry, the guest rooms, house, cars, gardens. So you cut down on having to duplicate everything because there's lots of sharing. And usually between 10 to 40 households. It depends on the availability of the land and the property that you've got to work with. Again, re-emphasizing the resident control of decision making, that even once the property is up and running, you need some kind of, so instead of having a factor or a management group, you do all that yourself and you involve everybody in the decision making. And you're inclusive within your community, but you're also inclusive in terms of the wider community, and being on board with activities that will help everybody. And lots of things that Petra has mentioned would fit in with that. This is a picture of Lilac, which is the one of the first co-housing, not the first at all, but one of the first co-housing groups in England, in Leeds. And this group, Lilac, have actually kind of piloted this mutual home ownership society, which is a way of not just being cooperatives with where everybody rents, but where people have an opportunity to actually buy equity in their property as well. I think Lilac got this piece of land a bit cheaper because of this little blob of land, water in the middle here, that made into a lovely feature. And I think it wasn't a very popular piece of land among developers. But you can see here that they've got the buildings where, the houses where people actually live, and then you've got your big common area with meeting rooms, a kitchen, somewhere people can sit, share meals, and laundry, etc., which cuts down on a lot of environmental damage. This was the architect's sketch that for St. Crispin's, which was the bid we were unsuccessful with. And again, it just shows the little houses around the edge, common areas in the middle, lots of green space and very little car parking space, which is, hits all the right buttons. And we've got the same architect, Richard Atkins, working with us on Comiston. So this is Comiston Farmhouse, which is, our project that we're hoping, may become co-housing community, but there's a lot riding on it and a lot of hurdles to overcome. As you can see, it's all boarded up. So Comiston Farmhouse is actually in the south of Edinburgh. It's right on the border between Fairmile Head and Oxgangs. It's almost next door to Pentland Primary School and very closely, close walk from Fairmile Head Park. So it's in quite an affluent area. Even the element of Oxgangs is not as some of the deprived areas of Oxgangs is a bit further away. So this farm has been in existence for nearly 200 years. And it was stopped being a farm probably in the 50s or 60s. And then it was either acquired or bought by the council and used as a children's home and possibly even an old people's home, I'm not sure. But this is an aerial view. And so this is the building here. And these outbuildings may or may not be used. And this big green space at the back has got planning permission for 6 small houses to be built on it. And so this is what the proposal is: 6 small buildings at the back here, and to refurbish the farmhouse into flats as well. And that's just a lovely picture, which is off a website that one of the local community people created, a website with a history of the farmhouse when the farmhouse was first put up for sale after the children's home was closed, which I shall come on to. Because the children's home was closed in 2015 and the property was put up for sale, and it was bought by a developer who put in a plan to knock it all down and to build a block of 30 flats. And everybody who lived around and about rose up as one and said, no, we do not want this. We do not want more flats. We don't want all the cars that would be associated with that. And so through public meetings and lobbying, they actually got the planning permission overturned and the developer had to walk away. Apparently that same developer did put in an alternative plan without knocking down the farmhouse, but for some reason they withdrew it. Maybe there wasn't enough profit, we don't know. So the property has remained empty since then. So January 2021 was when David Somerville found out that the Comiston Farmhouse had been put on for sale again. And so he sent an information note to everybody in Choice, anybody who'd been involved with Choice, informally or otherwise, and asked people if they wanted to put in an expression of interest to be part of a group, to form a co-housing group that might take forward this project as co-housing. And we all paid £250 towards incidental expenses. At the moment, most of the group are single over 50s, but we also have some couples and a couple of single parents. And we've been through this massive learning curve about what's involved in putting in a bid to the council, the demands of planning, the lack of communication between the council and ourselves, unknown we didn't know about things like community right to buy. We didn't know about community asset transfer. We didn't know our rights or the community's rights over that building. We were only working through Zoom, and we never actually met each other, and still haven't really met each other except on the odd occasion. But we had the money to buy in professional support, which was essential. So we have a really good architect who's done some lovely drawings. He's listened to the group about what they want, what they'd like to see. He's amended his drawings, and he's also submitted them to the planning department as a kind of starter point for how we don't want just 6 houses and 4 flats. We want something different. Where I put Chartered Surveyor on the slide is actually a guy called John Mark DiCiacca, who has very experience in property development. He's been involved working with Edinburgh Council. He's had various building projects on the go, so he's very knowledgeable. And he's been working with us for very little remuneration, on the basis that if we're successful, you know, he'll be able to do more work. And if we're not successful, then none of us will benefit. We've also had to have legal advice again as to what sort of organization we should become in order to be able to submit a viable and compliant bid. We've done a lot of community engagement with the people living around about, people in Comiston and Oxcans. We've done leaflet drops, and we've had a couple of public meetings on Zoom, and people have generally been very supportive, and they like the idea of a co-housing community rather than a developer buying it, knocking up flats and houses and then just selling them to people who can afford them. So where we are now, and that is 4 months, nearly 5 months down the road, Joyce has now been incorporated as a company limited by guarantee. I'm actually a director, and I had my letter from Companies House on Monday, along with David Somerville, Mike Wilson, and Liz Murdoch. But we're still looking at the Mutual Home Ownership Society as a preferred model for the housing co-op when it's eventually, if we're successful in getting the property, then we will, and doing it up, and then when we finally have people living there, that's what we would like it to be, mutual home ownership. Excuse me. So we've been raising funds, i.e. looking at what savings we've got as a group, who of us own properties and how much might be worth if we wanted to sell them. We've had very positive conversations with Ecology Building Society, who lend money on this kind of project. They're very keen on projects that are environmentally sustainable, which ours would be. We would look at it being very well insulated, all the latest technology in terms of heating, and as I say, sharing cars, cycle banks, etc. So they're interested in all that element of it. We're still accepting new members into our groups, and we've had 2 good publicity slots. We had a piece in the Scotsman picked up from one of our group writing a press release, and we had a really nice piece on the BBC online news pages, because one of the BBC writers actually lives in the vicinity, so picked up one of our leaflets, and she did a very nice piece for us on what we want to do. And I can share a link if you haven't seen it. And as a result, we did actually have a lot of people contacting us saying, yes, I really like this group, what can I do to support it? And people saying, you know, yes, I would like to be part of it as well. The council has now set the closing date for the 15th of June, which is next week. So our man, John Mark DiCiacca, is writing the bid on our behalf, and which is amazing, because I don't know whether any of us would have had the knowledge and the know-how to actually to do that. But even when the bid goes in, we still need to raise our profile, maintain pressure on councillors, on MSPs, that this is co-housing is a really good idea for this building. It shouldn't just be allowed to go to yet another developer. There are already so many buildings that have been sold straight to developers. The Sick Kids Hospital on the Meadows is one, Boroughmuir High School, and it's just, we don't want to see all our public buildings just being transferred to private hands and then on to people with money, and disregarding the community and all the lovely things that Petra talked about. Affordability is our main issue of concern, because this is a really expensive building. The council want £1 million just for the purchase. It'll need a further £2 million spending on it to build the small houses and to refurbish the flats. And our numbers are unknown. We don't know exactly how much money we have, but also our group is not yet finalized, so we don't know how many single property we might need, how many houses for flat families we'll need. But we do know that we want it to be intergenerational. We want to have older people, single people, younger people, children, want them all to have a chance to live here if we're successful in actually being able to buy it. But we are in competition with developers because co-housing is not well understood. The community right to buy was a very last minute thing. The community asset transfer was a very last minute thing. And we do feel that the council, should have been able to tell us ages ago, this is something that you might be eligible for. This is something that you could consider, instead of just saying, well, you've got to bid along with everybody else. It is a high value area of Edinburgh. So the final value of the property, should we be successful in getting it, refurbishing it, would be of a high value. So that is a plus for us in terms of securing funding from, the Ecology Building Society or other lenders. The whole issue of legal structures, community benefit societies, company limited by guarantee, co-ops, mutual home ownerships, has all been very confusing and a massive learning curve for us as well. And we just ran out of time to look at all the other options. So company limited by guarantee is where we are. That at least allows choice to put in a bid. And if we're successful, then other options might become available further down the line. Here is some more useful information on co-housing and our particular project. We have a Facebook page, Choice does. It's not really very user-friendly information-wise. Cohousing UK has a very good website. England seems to be far ahead of Scotland in terms of getting co-housing off the ground. And the two ones below here, Lilac and Your Space in York, both have got really good websites. Your Space has got the most amazing business plan explaining how they've put together their bid, how they've worked with the council. And so they've actually secured the land, but they've not actually built it yet. We're aware of the Housing 2040 strategy, which actually mentions community-led housing, but it only mentions co-op. There's no mention of co-housing because, they don't understand it, I think. And finally, we have got a Cohousing Scotland website and a group in development, and that's not actually up and running yet, but it will be there. And finally, this is our website, comiston.org, and this is our email address, info@comiston, for information. And this is me, and I'm happy to answer any questions when the appropriate time comes down the line. So thank you very much for listening. That's me.
Thank you, Jan. That was fantastic. And my goodness, what a journey you've been on.
Certainly, yes.
Okay, I think we've got about 10 minutes before we take a quick break. So Lenka, I don't know if you've got any questions that people have been putting in the chat, or whether anybody just wants to raise a hand. And happy to take questions either to Petra or Jan at this stage, or indeed anything else anybody wants to raise. So
there is nothing in the chat, Pat,
okay.
but I see Rose just put her hand up.
Okay.
Hi all. I'm from Swansea Cohousing. That was a fantastic talk and so much resonated with me. But actually my question is for Petra, who gave a wonderful talk, but I wondered who was enforcing all your the new Scottish Act.
You mean how did it go about in the first instance, the changes?
No, what sanctions are there if local authorities don't follow the Act?
Oh, well, they have to, but there are lots of different sections. And at the moment, what's happening is they're going through the details. Yes, a new planning legislation has to weave a lot of components together, and it is a quasi-legal process, as we know, and you are aware in Wales as well. So I think that will take time, and I think normally we would have expected it by now, but because of the pandemic, this has been a journey. I've been told that the National Planning Framework, or what we call the Plan for Scotland, will go to Parliament in November. So hopefully for discussion. And we of course had also an election, so there was a bit of a bird-up period.
Yes.
But they have to be definitely legally absolutely robust. And that's where we are, I think, from our perspective, from a past perspective, I really want to make sure that the local place plan is not just tokenistic, but it really does give opportunities. So like, for example, Jan was talking about co-housing, that they really can be identified in a local place plan. But yeah, the legal wrangle is going on.
Thanks.
Jan has her hand up, and also Jan, there's also a question for you in the chat.
Oh, okay, in the chat. Oh, shall I ask my question first? My question is for Petra, obviously, and I've really enjoyed listening to her talk. But what strikes me is how little all these groups that are involved in doing stuff, how little we know about each other and how little we know what we're doing. And you know, it almost feels like a conspiracy of the council to not let us talk to each other or not pass on, you know, somehow there's a mechanism missing. And so
I think, Jan, I think what I would say, I don't feel there's a conspiracy, but I think a lot of local authorities work in their own bubble, and I think it's maybe incumbent on an organization like ourselves, and I'm involved obviously with co-housing and with David Somerville and his initiative for a long time now. It's maybe incumbent on all of us to start thinking, okay, how can we make a better, raise higher awareness? And I think Pat's the network is really important in that, and maybe a dedicated website where communities can go to and say, okay, this is what's happening. So I certainly think that we should, the more we work together, and it's not anti-local authorities, not anti-developers, but I think there is an appetite. And you mentioned earlier on Boroughmuir. I should say, with a different hat, I'm also on the Link Group Housing Association. And of course, we were delighted that we, at the back of this development being granted, got 25% for affordable housing stock in an area where people don't have to have a car, where people can actually walk to the shops. So I always like to look at it in the entirety, but I think there's still a lot more to be done, definitely.
Yeah, and could I just do a little supplementary question while I got the floor, which is about donor economics. And I saw a YouTube video about the city can be a donor, and I liked your circle diagram because it reminded me of that. And I wondered whether you're aware of
the hollow out effect.
Yes, the idea of the donut is that you need to be in the middle of the donut, so you don't miss people out by moving into the middle, and you don't spill out
exactly
by damaging the environment for
the donut effect. I mean, there has been very much the tradition of, say, in the 70s and the 60s, building out of town is very car-led. We're seeing it differently now, and I think again, UN Habitat have started to do a lot more work around the kind of cities that we need to have for the future. That links with the demand on an active aging population, but also on the climate emergency. So we will see, and that's where the 20-minute neighborhood fits in to change that narrative.
Yeah. Shall I quickly answer my co-question?
Yeah.
There's a question in the chat. I'll quickly answer that and then I'll shut up. So co-housing is for rent and for purchase. I think it can be for both. I think it depends on the setup of the group and the choices made as part of the design and development. Certainly the mutual home ownership is quite new, and that does allow people to buy an equity in the property. So it can be rented, but with the purchase, you buy a piece of equity of the whole community, and you can then sell it, but you can't sell it at a massive profit. You can sell it if you wanted to move out and get your money out. You can do that after probably, I think it's 3 years. So like, once the group's consolidated and things have settled down, you can sell your bit, get your money back plus a bit. And the bit you get back is aligned with wages increase, not in line with property increases generally. because, as I say, affordability. So I hope that answers that question.
Brilliant, thank you, Jan. Thank you, Jan. We also had Sam having her hand up, and then Annie. So Sam, I'm not sure if your question has been similar to Mathilde's and it's just been answered. Is Sam still here?
I am.
Right.
Sorry, I thought we were about to go for coffee break, so I didn't want to drag that on. Anyway, my question really is to Petra and to Jan. To Petra, I suppose it's really around the national planning framework and such policy. Does she think that gives the correct signals to developers that they should look beyond the traditional remit of what buildings are, what they're for, and who they're for? And also for Jan, I'd ask, what does she think we could do to turn the conversation around, whereby the developer is an asset to our aspirations rather than something we have to fight against? And what would make that change for her and her experience? Thank you.
Okay, Jan, do you want to answer first, or shall I?
Unmute myself. Yes. Yeah, I guess, my attitude to developers is a bit negative, actually, which perhaps it shouldn't be, because there is a place for them, obviously. And, in conversations with friends, there's still a place for people who want to buy a house for profit. I understand that totally. I think with developers, that maybe they should be persuaded or, legally coerced into using more environmental techniques in their building, so that the properties are a low cost to run, either for the purchaser or if it's social housing for the residents. And I did see something on the website, and I wasn't able to find out more information, but there in Granton, there is a plan for a new village to be built. And this was a consultative afternoon for people living in Granton to talk to a developer about, and they were going to build 75 eco homes. So that sounds like the sort of thing developers should be looking at and thinking about. But I couldn't really say if that's a good example because I wasn't able to go to the consultation. So I hope that answers your question.
So on the MPF4, I would say I would agree that not all developers are bad. It's somehow it's a system that actually plays us against. So, and we hear hopefully from a very thoughtful developer later on. But I think what I would really like to stress on MPF4 for the first time, we're seeing a very different shift towards, like I mentioned, the well-being. That's much higher in the and also climate change, and that drives a new way of and a 20-minute neighborhood that would not happen before. So there is some real shift occurring around how we creatively can use the planning system that actually then becomes an enabler. We have also been able to work on behalf of Scottish Government around the MPF4, particularly with young people, and Lenka was working on that. And it is quite striking how many more people, if they've been asked early on, how much more they get involved. And I hope we're seeing more of that in the future. Sorry, is that answering your question, Sam?
Yes, it's great. I just wanted to pick your brains on what you thought regarding those issues. So thank you very much for that.
I think obviously I'm a very positive person, so I think there's things, I do think there are lots more opportunities for working together across, not public versus private or private versus third, but actually really working together. And that's what I see huge rewarding at the moment.
Thanks very much, Petra. And one more question from Annie and Pat, am I right that then we break out for our little coffee break? So Annie.
Hi, it's not so much a kind of question that I'm looking for an answer. I'm looking for some more information. I did some work with the place standards, and I was interested in hearing more about, and obviously I can have this information out with this meeting if that's possible, to when Petra was talking about the participatory placemaking and also the community facilitators, and there was training around that. I would just like to find out more about that. So if we could maybe have that sent round, that would be good.
I would definitely yes, and we've got your details, haven't we? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
well,
just
yes,
okay.
I certainly
As
do.
we
So,
certainly can send that around, so you
Brilliant.
get some more details. Yeah.
Thank you.
so we can either send round to everybody, or I can put you in contact, whichever. Either's fine.
Annie, I
Thank you.
will drop you mine and Peter's email so you can
Fantastic.
just,
Thanks, Lenka.
no worries. Okay.
So thank you, everybody. Lenka, do you want to? I was just going to say thank you, everybody. And I think for me, the conversation so far, and bearing in mind we're only halfway through, has just, I think for me, just illustrated the importance. I would say this, wouldn't I? But the importance and the power of networking. And I think, there's been a lot of conversation about people coming together, working together, having conversations. And I just think that is absolutely key. So off you go, everybody. Have a comfort break. Make yourself a new cup of coffee. And if you could come back in about 5 minutes, that would be great, because we've got two more presentations, 3 more speakers this afternoon, and we want to give them full justice as well. So thank you all, and we'll see you soon.
Cheers. Thank you, Pat.
shall we start again then, Kat?
Sounds good.
Yep, people will come back in.
Sounds good.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I hope you had a good, if brief, break. And we're now going to move on to the next presentation. So the presentation you just heard from Jan was about... Sorry? Somebody. Was about a journey. And I think what we're now about to hear is, I think possibly at this moment in time, I hope, although I haven't spoken to Judy for a while, about a more positive journey that they've been on over the last few years. So I'd like to welcome Judy Crabb and Rodney Matthews from Heart of New Haven.
Thanks, Pat. I think Rodney's going to introduce our little piece, and so you'd like to go first.
Okay, good morning everyone, and thank you for inviting us to present the story so far of the Heart of New Haven community. Just before I go into a quite short introduction, just wanted to connect back to the previous item, and particularly this question of new builds being co-builds and the need for community to be there present. And just to say that in addition to being chair of the Heart of New Haven...
Sorry, Rodney, I'm going to interrupt you just for a minute. There's somebody, I think somebody isn't muted because somebody's got, I don't know what's going on in their background, okay, but it sounds like building. So if everybody apart from Rodney could please mute themselves. Thank you. Sorry, Rodney, carry on.
Okay, just to hark back to the previous item, to say that in addition to being chair of the Heart of New Haven, and Judy is our task coordinator, which means that Judy does all the hard work. So you'll listen very much to Judy. She has a much more detailed nuance of what we're doing than I do. But for the past 5 years, I've been chairman of the development where I've lived for the last 7 years, which is a private development of 300 homes. So I live on the 8th floor of a multi-story 11-block property around a courtyard garden. And it is perfectly possible, but takes a lot of effort to become a community in these kind of developments. And not only that, but our community in the element, which is where I live, is very much part and an essential part of the development of the Heart of New Haven, as are the other developments of this kind. So I just put down that marker because it's not, as it were, either or, but it's both and. However, now back to my actual script, which is sort of quite brief. The teachers among you will know the mantra of the eminent Swiss psychologist Jean Piaget on child development. What I hear, I forget. What I see, I remember. What I do, I understand. The Heart of New Haven community is a doer. What we are doing is under another triad that has become our particular mantra: the past, the future, the present. Interconnected themes of culture and heritage that mold us where we've come from, learning and enterprise stretching our imagination where we're going, and well-being, the buzzword of the pandemic experience. 3 themes that interconnect to identify the Heart of New Haven community. Judy is going to introduce a story that you can both hear and see in a video in the making, still very much a work in progress, which will lead us to exchanges where we are all now, in whatever we're doing, to enrich the lives of those around us, which is what community is all about. So the third element of understanding is what's going to happen in what we do in engaging with each other after the presentation has been made. There are 3 other simple markers necessary to put down for context, which will be very familiar to a few of you, reasonably known by most of you, but perhaps unknown to one or two of you, especially those who are with us from England and Wales. And Ireland, did I hear Ireland is with us? I'm not sure. Anyway, it's these things that are known to some of us, but relatively unknown to others, is a thing to concentrate on. I'm a self-confessed slow learner, so I always like to include those who, like me, need the basics spelt out, the ABC, the 1, 2, 3 of community asset transfer. And here I'm talking about Scotland. As Petra explained, because of the Community Empowerment Scotland Act 2015, no council anywhere may dispose of unwanted buildings or land that they own by selling to the highest commercial bidder without first offering the local community, however that's defined, a chance to show how it would use it if offered at a negotiated price. That's the law in Scotland, and no council can flout it. That's point one. Point two, the Scottish Land Fund, again, as the name suggests, set up by the government, makes awards to organisations such as the Heart to help with both capital and revenue costs. Hard on this is point three. Of the types of body qualifying, because obviously no Tom, Dick and Harry can claim to be the local community on his own, of the types of organisations qualifying, we chose to become a Scottish charitable incorporated organisation known as a SCIO, registered with OSCR, the Scottish Charity Regulator. So we've travelled a long way from a standing start less than 3 years ago. And even though we have some way to go, and this is the point, we are already doing all of those things I referred to as past, present, and future, as you'll now hear and see. So this is our story so far, as Judy is going to explain. And after that, you can help us actually do it. So Judy.
Thanks, Rodney. Lenka's going to play the video in just a second, but I'll explain that it's actually being put together by our team of young volunteers who have been helping us with communications. And it's our journey is, and the community asset transfer process is very much a microcosm of the principles that Petra was explaining earlier. So I think you've done a great job, Pat, at linking these things together so well. So if you would like to view this video, say, please bear in mind, this is not the final version, but what we are trying to share are the voices of the community explaining what it's all been about and where we hope that we're going. So Lenka, would you like to play it, please? Thank you.
I hope everyone can see it, and let me know if you can hear it.
Road of Newhaven in North Edinburgh is set to see rapid population growth over the next 20 years, a rise to 16,300 people by 2025, and over 20,000 people by the mid-2030s is expected. The area lacks a recognised community centre.
But Victoria Primary School, the oldest working primary school in Edinburgh, is moving. As people numbers increase, a new school is currently under construction on Western Harbour. The school is expected to move to a new building in autumn 2021.
This means that the historic Victoria Primary School building and the others making up the school will become vacant. When City of Edinburgh Council provided the consultation report about the new school, They noted that council officers would provide support to community groups wishing to consider community ownership of the existing Victoria Primary School building through the community asset transfer process.
The possibility of creating a community hub on the old Victoria Primary School site was investigated within the local community. People got together to share their ideas. 65 local organisations were contacted for their views, which were all positive. There were 2 public meetings, each attended by over 100 people, and 500 people participated in further consultations. Participants were asked what they would want from a community space.
A sense of belonging and enhancing the community spirit.
A place to help children, young people and families achieve positive outcomes in life.
Promote the arts and culture in New Haven and conserve its heritage.
The Heart of New Haven Community was constituted in January 2019 as an unincorporated association. On the 4th of February 2020, the Heart of New Haven Community SCIA was registered with the Office of the Scottish Charity Regulator as a 2-tier Scottish charitable incorporated organisation. A board of 11 trustees were appointed and 200 members have so far joined us on our journey.
Our community asset transfer application was granted by the City of Edinburgh Council in July 2020, recognising the opportunity for social benefits and wider community benefits which had been identified within our business plan.
As a response to the pandemic and the realisation that there would inevitably be a delay to being able to secure and open the Heart for use by the community, we have developed a number of community initiatives, not dependent on the building itself. These have addressed needs particularly highlighted by lockdown, such as loneliness, isolation, digital poverty, and environmental issues. We facilitated a number of partnership initiatives within the community, including
New Haven Lights Up, an invitation and online instructions to create decorated stained glass windows as a community activity to brighten up Christmas. Light boxes on the railings of Victoria Primary School displayed additional designs in partnership with local artists, the Men of Leaf Men's Shed, Victoria Primary School and local residents.
Wilding, increasing biodiversity by the planting of native saplings and a bird haven poster on an area of ground adjacent to the David Lloyd Centre. In partnership with the David Lloyd Centre itself, the Shoreline Project, local primary schools and Heart of New Haven volunteers.
Digital Devices Appeal, launched to support local schools struggling to support families with home learning. Over 20 devices so far have been donated. They've been cleaned and refurbished by people know how before being given to schools to give to families in need.
New Haven Sings, a recording of Auld Lang Syne as a gift to the community with members of New Haven Church, New Haven Community Choir and other Edinburgh residents.
Our first crowdfunding campaign, Kickstart Your Heart, happened between February and March 2021. We raised £5,345 to get everything off the ground and help fund the first stages of the design process. Locals were keen to contribute. Here's what they had to say.
This is a brilliant project that will deliver huge community benefits. It's well thought out and is being impressively well organised.
Very excited that the Victoria School building will benefit the whole community, as we're in desperate need of locations to reconnect humanly and interdependently, a lesson brought to us resoundingly by the COVID pandemic.
In April 2021, after many months of hard work, the SCIO calls its first AGM, a momentous step along the road that leads to the Heart. COVID-19 puts paid to a large physical gathering, however, and the over 200 members are invited to take part online.
What does the future hold for us? Well, subject to our funding bid to the Scottish Land Fund being successful, we will be engaging architects to conduct community-led design of the spaces in the Heart of New Haven building. In the short term, we're creating a temporary use strategy to ensure that the building can be used by the community as soon as possible. We'll be ensuring that the building meets health and safety requirements to allow for immediate use. The design process will help us understand how the spaces can be flexibly used in the long term to meet the needs of all users. This will help us to make bids for further funding to ensure that the Heart has a sustainable future. Funding from the National Lottery will facilitate this approach. We'll use this and the money that we raised in our crowdfunder to apply for a match fund from the Architectural Heritage Fund. This will cover professional costs and building costs. In the meantime, to maximise the difference we can make, we're continuing to work in partnership with local organisations, developing intergenerational projects to build connections, support and understanding.
In partnership with Pulmeni Development Project, we are developing ways of tackling the digital divide by recruiting volunteers to support older people in the use of IT. Friendship benches to go in the grounds of the Heart, made by Men's Shed, will be decorated by younger and older people in October as part of Mental Health Week.
Pots of New Haven Kindness will involve 24 P5 children from Victoria Primary School who will decorate flower pots and sow them with a variety of salad and edible flower seeds. These pots will then be given to 12 local, older, isolated people along with growing instructions and a letter to say hello. In partnership with Friends of Victoria Park and local schools, we will be planting a small fruit orchard in Victoria Park and wilding the edges of the allotments, thereby increasing biodiversity as well as an appreciation of the environment.
If you would like to get involved, please get in touch. There are plenty of volunteering tasks to fill within your neighbourhood, including providing digital support for people in your community, as well as opportunities to support with communications and social media. Please email volunteer@heartofnewhaven.co.uk and please keep an eye on our social media for big news in the near future.
Thank you, Lenka.
No problem. That was a really interesting video.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. As I say, we know it's got a few rough edges, but I think it's important that it contains the voices of just some of the many, many community members that have got involved with this. I think perhaps we also ought to say, Rodney, that this week is quite momentous because we are actually submitting finally our bid to Scottish Land Fund for the purchase price of the school. We don't know when the decision will be made, but it probably be sometime in July. So as that video said, keep an eye on our website. There's plenty of things happening and hopefully all good things. I don't know if take questions or at the end.
Brilliant. Pat, are you still here? I hope Pat is still here, but I believe it will now be time for...
Sorry, I am still here. Sorry, I was muted. I was just checking if Rodney wants to come back in, and if not, we'll pass over to Petra, who is going to introduce the next speaker.
The only point, I mean, I hope there will be discussion around what we've said for a few minutes, but the only point I need to emphasize, which is the technical one, is that although the video was included in the recording, and we didn't want it not to be recorded in the recording for record purposes, it can't, you must not yourself download it and use any of it. Because it is under copyright at the moment, and it hasn't been yet approved by the board of trustees. So that because it's a work in progress, we wanted to be able to share it with you. But if you have sort of got it in your own records at the moment, if you can delete it once the meeting's over, that would be appreciated. Okay.
I'm sure that Lenka's skills will cope with that admirably, Rodney.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But certainly talk around what we presented and the content, because that basically is our story so far.
I just have to say, Rodney and Judy, I mean, it's fantastic to see this project having developed so much in a relatively short time. And I think this is also something that I was talking earlier about multi-generational house or centres. They are so much part of the community well-being. And we really need to make sure that government really gets that message loud and clear, because I do think, certainly I'm a total fan of it. So well done. In such a short time, achieved such a lot. And I hold it up as an exemplar for other areas in Scotland that we want to work with. So I have the honor to introduce the next speaker, which is Caroline Casperson. Caroline Casperson is the operations director for Crosswind Developments. It's a private development company based in Edinburgh, and it's working on the master plan area that I described earlier on, master plan area of around 30 hectare site in West Edinburgh. In addition, Caroline is also a treasurer of PASS, as well as she sits on the audit committee of Link Group. So there are connections. So over to you, Caroline. I'm really looking forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you, Petra. Thank you. Just before I start, I'd just like to congratulate both Cohousing and New Haven for the teams there and the incredible work that they're doing. It's hugely inspiring. So well done, and really enjoyed hearing both stories, and both at very interesting stages of your journey. So, and I wish you every bit of luck with it in the future, and I'll be watching it from afar for sure and see how they progress. So well done to everybody involved in those projects. So yeah, so I'm going to bring up a slide, and Link, if you could just confirm you see my screen when I hit share screen, please.
Absolutely. Yes, it is loading and it's looking positive. Yes, all good.
It's popped up. Great, thank you. Okay, so yes, as Petra says, I work for a private development company called Crosswind Developments. So yeah, quite a different approach in terms to what we've heard so far. And you know, I did like you know, Sam's question earlier to Jan about how we make developers more of an asset in some of the projects that we're working on. And, you know, that kind of got me thinking as well. And I've actually kind of during it, you know, and I was listening to you, so I inserted this slide at the beginning. For me, the big thing with private developers, anyone that you work with, is about how you get comfortable they're accountable to someone. And, you know, for the, you know, private developers or commercial organizations, they are created to create money. But ultimately, they need to create money and build a business that's sustainable, you know, not become a one-hit wonder. So, you know, and to be that, you need to be accountable to your customers. You need to be accountable to your employees, your funders, your shareholders, and your stakeholders. So I think whenever as an organization you are looking at private developers, I would stress you to look at these aspects. And do you think that's an organization that is accountable to these important people? And if, as a private developer, you're not accountable for them, then I truly do not believe your business will be sustainable. I put customers and employees at the top of the list. I think their voices are the strongest. Customers nowadays in the private sector, and particularly in property development, are making developers much more accountable for what they are doing in terms of creating places that are accountable for social development as well as environmental sustainability. So I think they cannot ignore that these are the demands now of their customers. And as a result of their customers demanding it, their funders are also demanding it. So the big banks, all the rest of it, you know, they are now hugely accountable to the public, to their shareholders, that they are funding organizations that will, you know, that are doing the right things in terms of listening to their communities, delivering products that meet customer needs and that are socially sustainable, etc. So the conversation around this has changed materially, I would say, in about the last kind of 5 years. And then I think the pandemic has only heightened it. Because, you know, the pandemic has highlighted where perhaps developments haven't been done in a social, inclusive way. And indeed, it's these communities that maybe have felt quite isolated during the pandemic, unsupported and things like that. So I think the pandemic, you know, one of the good things out of the pandemic is it's heightened the need to ensure we are building socially inclusive and intergenerational communities going forward. Peter talked about, you know, the introduction of local place plans in Scotland. You know, I think that's a fantastic move, but for me, I'm hugely sceptical about how local authorities are going to be held accountable to those local place plans. I really want to see them being held accountable. And as a private developer that's just gone through a master plan process with a local authority, you know, we've been working in this master plan for 3 years. You know, what I get concerned about is the agenda that the planning officers are still talking to. It doesn't have people at the top of that agenda. I still think people and communities come too far down the agenda. So, you know, it's still too much about buildings, about transport, when instead, I think the agenda needs to start with social inclusivity and environmental aspects. I'm not saying they're not on the agenda, I just think they are in the wrong place on the agenda. You know, as I said, we've just gone through a process and I didn't have enough conversations with a planning officer about intergenerational communities and social inclusivity, you know, which kind of made me slightly nervous, because we have tried to develop a master plan here that puts those things at the top of the agenda. So moving on to introduce Elements Edinburgh. So for those that know Edinburgh, you may be very familiar with this site. From those of you who are not, I'll give you some context. Hopefully you can see my mouse moving around my screen. But this large blue blob is that 30-hectare site that Petra called out. And contextualize it, you can see here there is a runway. This was the old second runway at Edinburgh Airport that was decommissioned in 2017. The airport operational fence is now up about here, so a few acres away from where we are. And in the distance, you can just see the current runway. So just in case anyone's concerned, the noise contours, because the planes land in this direction and take off in that direction, you actually do not have any noise from the airport on this plot of land. And indeed, anybody who's residents in areas such as Crammond and Barnton will tell you they have all the noise, because the planes actually come over those residents on their way into landing on this airport. So up here we have a gateway station that was developed by Scottish Government and City of Edinburgh Council. So this is the Edinburgh North line that takes you up to Aberdeen. Railway line, and we also have the tram in Edinburgh. If you're not familiar with Edinburgh, this is the tram depot that goes all the way to the top of Leith Walk just now, and is being developed to go down to New Haven, which is great news for Leith and New Haven. But it at the moment goes through this depot, and you can just see the tram line here, and it meanders its way into the airport. So there's a tram stop, a train station, and then again in the other side here is West Edinburgh. So there's quite a lot of dense development already there in West Edinburgh. We have a shopping centre, and that is also a bus interchange, and we have some business parks, and Edinburgh Business Park's been there for a number of years. And again, those that are familiar with Edinburgh Business Park will know that there is development going on in Edinburgh Business Park just now, and they're actually introducing residential spaces into Edinburgh Business Park, which tells you a lot about, you know, the future of business parks. They no longer work as just being business parks. So West Edinburgh is a hugely important area for City of Edinburgh Council and delivery of future homes. So here, this green land space here There's 2,500 family homes being developed in there. They have planning permission and they have commenced development on that site. We have what is called the Garden District. There's over 5,000 homes going in here. And then this is Edinburgh International Business Gateway. This is a 200-acre site that's going to support commercial and living accommodation. So we're kind of sandwiched in the middle of it all, but the wonderful thing about our site is we have some fantastic connectivity already established in order to minimise, you know, the need for car transport coming into this site. You know, we are 500 metres walk to a station for the tram, for the train, and there's already a very good pedestrian underpass that takes you through to that bus interchange as well. But through time, buses will hopefully come onto our site and actually travel through our site to get to the airport, so there'll be plenty of buses. So the vision for the site, you know, Crosswinds is being developed as, well, Elements Edinburgh is the name of the site. Crosswinds is us as development company. You know, we have designed the site to be a mixed use development. We want this to feel like a live work environment, but it's going to be affordable to all and accessible to all. We are aspiring for passive housing development. We think that's the future. Building standards are only going to go one way in terms of creating new properties that meet the environmental standards they need to meet in this day and age. Passive house is one of those standards, and that's what we are aspiring to for our buildings. Active travel in terms of minimising spaces for cars and maximising spaces for walking and cycle routes through the site, connectivity obviously to other sites, and generally just creating a real community ecosystem in their design as well, which I'll share with you. So as I said, it's a mixed use development. This is how we have divided it up. 42% of the site will be green space. So the actual building areas there, you can see at the top here, only actually cover 23% of the space. So it's a brownfield site. It is going to have height in it. We have residential blocks, which will house just under 2,500 units, but they will be ranging from 4-storey buildings to 6-storey buildings. So what I wouldn't necessarily call a tower block as such. The commercial properties, they may go a bit higher, up to 8-storey, but again, it's not too dense in terms of height, but it will feel like there is a lot of people there to help create that sense of community. There'll also be some leisure space and a hotel space as well, which again kind of reflects the location in terms of that connectivity piece. Firstly, we're close to the airport, but also that we are so closely connected into the city, so it makes a great kind of stop-off place for visitors to Scotland. And that kind of contextualise that connectivity that we've got and that we want to take advantage of. There is not many brownfield sites that come into development that have such established connectivity already. So it's really we maximise that, and that will also help, make this an attractive location for anyone to come and live in it. So, to help intergenerational community that we want to create. So we talked about the 42% open green public space. And that is a part of Edinburgh. So there's a Goga burn runs to the edge of our site. It doesn't run through our site, But right now, that piece of land and that biodiversity area is not open to the public. You know, no one can actually walk into that piece of land at the moment and experience, you know, the wildlife that's around the Goga Burn. So this will really open up a new piece of landscape for people to come and visit, of a scale that it won't just be residents. We want it to be a destination. And separately, Crosswind is a separate project, are working with the Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh, Nature Scotland, Scottish Enterprise, to look at how we can actually create an urban park right across all those developments I touched on earlier for West Edinburgh. There is capacity to actually create about 400 acres of green space in that entire area, which could be one of the largest biodiversity parks, you know, and certainly in Scotland. If you get this right, when you build out that community in West Edinburgh and actually join up the green spaces, and indeed join up those green spaces to well-established walks, etc., such as the John Muir Way, that is across, you know, the Lothian already. So we're, as I said, we're working on a separate project, and, you know, our own park will play a part in that. So that's the kind of, you know, that green space that's going to be accessible by everyone, walking distance by everyone within that site. The living spaces, you know, what we're not trying to do here is create penthouse suites, and at the same time, we're not creating family homes with gardens and the 2 garages and all the rest of it. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Firstly, going back to the location, we are surrounded by other developments. There's 2,500 family homes directly across the railway from us. And you know, what we want to create is living accommodation that will be aligned to the businesses that will also be within this site. So we, you know, this accommodation will be largely rented. Again, I think that reflects the shift in demand in the cities we are seeing across the UK. I believe Scotland is behind us a little bit. You know, we have people on from Liverpool today, you know, cities like Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds, Birmingham, they now have, you know, most of their new development is predominantly now rented accommodation, and that reflects that, you know, it reflects probably how people want to live, and it's probably aligning us more with our European peers. You know, we have heavy residential ownership in this country, whereas in fact our European peers, it's the opposite. So I think the UK has always been a little bit behind, and actually, you know, consumers now and customers, they're demanding now more. They don't want to own properties and the complexities of that. They would rather rent. They're much more transient communities as well. They like to move around. So, you know, I think cities like Edinburgh need to create that space that we welcome people in, that may only want to be in Edinburgh for then move on to the next venture. So Elements Edinburgh, I think, will be predominantly rented space reflecting that. And because of the designs of the housing, you know, affordable living will be integrated with private living, will be integrated with retirement living, will be integrated with student accommodation. You won't be able to tell which is which, quite frankly, between, you know, the developments, which will really help integrate them and create a sense of community. We're promoting it for the commercial space for a digital ecosystem. Digital isn't a sector in its own right. That's because every sector has digital in it now. It doesn't matter what you do nowadays, there's always something digital within your organization. So as a skill, it is something that is becoming, you know, more and more important. And it's also a very accessible skill to achieve. It's you know, you don't need to study for years to become, you know, skillful in digital, you know, capabilities. Although you can, if you wish, you know, it offers you a bit of everything. So we think it's a very inclusive capability, and subsequently bringing, you know, organizations that have digital aspects, they want to work beside other organizations with the digital aspects, because it's very much about a knowledge sharing community. And the other aspect we want to do is bring education in here. So either from our local colleges, bring their digital departments in here, or schools. You know, could you have a digital academy in here that your local academies can actually send the classes for digital training into this ecosystem, and they undertake their education within this type of environment, which helps hopefully inspire those pupils to come and work in this ecosystem. Yep, so we're talking about minimizing cars. So we've designed it as a car-free central hub, and you know, everything, all the amenities will be within the central hub, all within walking distance, such that everybody will meander into this area at some point during the day to help create that mixed community. Housing will face onto this central hub in addition to commercial space. So, you know, it will be a 24-hour community space, and not like a business park that goes, you know, quiet at 5 o'clock at night when everyone gets in their cars and drives off. This will be very much a living community space. And yes, as I said, sustainability at the heart of what we're trying to design. Passive housing for the building, you know, rain gardens are going to be incorporated throughout, you know, recycling as much as we can within within the development, and encouraging that active travel movement. So, you know, residents that don't need a car and don't want a car, but have maybe access to car hubs and things like that. And then finally, this is just a kind of outline of the parameter plan of it. So you can see the kind of green space throughout this site. This area here is your access into the site. This is a Goga roundabout, if anyone knows Edinburgh. And this will be an active travel route to the airport. What you have to remember is the airport alone has 2,000 employees. I know they might not all be at work just now, given the pandemic, but we will hope through time that those employees will return, and they are a mix of skills, you know, people that work within an airport. So having affordable living and that's accessible, it allows them to travel to work by bike or by foot, you know, is really important. And there's also a number of contractors that go in and out airports as well. Edinburgh Airport at the moment, just to contextualise that a little bit, most of their employees come from the Central Belt, so they don't come from Edinburgh, which tells you a lot about the affordability of their housing, and subsequently, you know, the kind of pay scales that they're on working within an airport. So creating affordable living for next to something as big as an airport is really important for those employees. And you know, you take away that travel that they have to undertake just now. So I'm going to stop talking because I'm now actually tired of the sound of my own voice. And, you know, happy to take any questions from anybody.
Thanks very much, Caroline. Just a quick comment. Would be lovely to see on the flat roofs some green roof gardens or solar panels.
It'll definitely be solar panels.
Sustainability comment there.
Yeah, no, definitely solar panels. the big thing with sustainable energy is it makes energy so much more affordable for people. So the more sustainable your heat and your power into it, the better. And we're looking at a whole host of different things about how to do that. And one of the big things is about creating a heat network in West Edinburgh. So all these developments will actually have the benefits of that, not just ours. The developments have to work together with that. The more you scale it, the greater efficiency you get from it. So that's in all our interest to do it. So you're absolutely bang on that. We'll definitely be doing that.
Caroline, can I just hand over to Pat again to then see if there are any more questions for you? I certainly have some as well. But Pat, are you back? Yeah,
I am back. Yes.
Okay.
Caroline, can you stop sharing your screen so we can see people?
Thank you, Pat.
Okay, that's great.
Thank you ever so much for that. I think, for me, this has been one of the most, I think probably one of the most wide-ranging conversations we've had in the network in a long time. And I think we've covered so much ground. So yes, absolutely. Let's see if we've got any questions, either in the chat, Lenka, or if anybody wants to raise a hand.
Yeah, I'd like to ask the question
Petra wants to start.
Sorry, if you don't mind, because obviously I don't know if I mentioned earlier on, the circular economy features very large now as well. So we are all being encouraged to think differently about the new building stock, but also retrofitting old. And I'm delighted that you adopted a passive house model. Are there any other opportunities to fit in the circular economy in other ways, Caroline?
Yeah, I think, definitely, when you look at things like waste management, as I said, I've touched on about where you source heat from. You use your natural resources within your site to source your heat. We're also next to an airport. You can imagine how much heat is in an airport. So how can we access that to the benefit of the residents here? And then obviously the transport piece is the other big piece about minimizing cars within the site and bringing cars onto the site. So creating a live-work environment that people genuinely want to live and work here, and subsequently they've got that connectivity into the city, without the need of a car. So I think that, that's the other big piece.
Thank you.
We have Jan.
Mine was a comment more than a question, just to say thank you very much. And you've completely changed my mind on developers. And I think it sounded fantastic. And what I really, really loved hearing was your comments about renting, because I do think that's so true, that if people have the option of proper, in this, so many people I know anyway, they say, oh, renting's dead money, is money down the drain. I'd rather buy and have something to show for it. But I think if we had a cheap, affordable rents, and people feel they're getting a really nice space to live for renting, I think that is way to go. So thank you so much. I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah, I think it puts everyone on a level playing field as well. And as a result, everybody cares about the community. So, this is also important. You'll appreciate Peter and I also on Link Group, who's a social landlord. Who obviously all our tenants are renting, but creating a community that's intergenerational within these within rented accommodation is really important, because everybody then starts to care a lot more about their community. Whereas I think in the past, you would maybe have a block that's rented and then the rest of the houses are private and they didn't care about each other too much. They kept themselves to themselves. But if you put everybody on a level playing field, then they all work together.
Yeah, this is so true, because I remember when I first moved to this country, I couldn't make up the phrase a foot on the property ladder. And for a long time, I didn't understand what that meant. A foot on the property ladder. Hang on a minute. These are homes. So obviously now I understand fully, but it is, we need to change differently. I think it's good to see more rented, especially in a place like Edinburgh, which is hugely pricey.
Yeah. Edinburgh is not a city that's really open to all. It needs to do more, definitely.
We have next question from Sam.
Hi, thank you, Caroline. That was a fabulous presentation and a both ambitious and far-sighted project. So very welcome. I'd just like to make a comment around something that maybe people aren't completely aware of, and that is in December I attended a meeting. It's the key agencies group that exist, and they've offered the opportunity to all local authorities to act and support developments that might be happening within their region. And certainly at the meeting I attended in the middle of December, if I just look at the attendance list, there were representatives from Perth and Kinross Council, because the development was in Perth West. In fact, it's only just, I think, last week been given approval and will begin. But within the room with the council representatives, the applicants, the architects and such like, and alongside them we had Nature Scotland, Historic Environment Scotland, SEPA, Scottish Water, Transport Scotland, Forestry Scotland, Scottish Enterprise, Public Health Scotland and Sport Scotland. So all of them in the room were all having a conversation about this development from their perspective, from their specialist area. And I think what impressed me most was how open the developer was to the suggestions that were being made within that conversation. And I think that's again, I just wanted to highlight, probably following off my previous comment around developers, given the opportunity, I think they realize which way the wind is blowing, and they're only too eager to be supportive of the aspirations of communities and organizations that would aspire to better living environments for us all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I might say something quite controversial here, but I actually find the agencies easier to work with than the council. So the agencies are very accessible. I'd say more forward thinking. I think the challenge we've found with local authority is they listen to the agencies, yes, but they don't necessarily play that role of bringing it all together with the developer. So I can't, you know, you do, I think that we did one meeting in our planning process where there was some of the agencies around the table, not all of them, but there needs to be more time in the diaries as part of your planning process where those types of meetings happen, Sam. But the local authority needs to be in the room, definitely. You know, we've had lots of meetings with agencies, but what we don't get is that meeting where everybody's in the room together. And that, you know, ultimately everybody needs the local authority at the table, you know, because at the end of the day, they are still the decision maker. Or if they're not the decision maker, you know, it's Scottish ministers, you know how it works. So I think local authorities need to get better at it. And I think from an observer from the outside looking in, it's all down to resource with the local authorities. They just seem to be lighter and lighter in resource and capacity. And I think these are all nice to haves. And there's a lot of talk, but they can't deliver on some of it because of that. And that's a big frustration.
Right. So, Sam, I'm sorry, I'm really conscious of time. I know that Lenka promised everybody we were going to finish at past. So,
Pat, I actually said that we'll finish it by 6 p.m.
Yeah, you did originally. People want to stay on till 6? I'm here. Thanks, Lenka. Seriously, Sam, if you really want to come back quickly, do.
No. That's fine. Thank you very much, Caroline. Good response.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you.
Okay, so I just want to do two things. One is obviously to say a big thank you to Petra, to Lenka, to Paz, to all of our speakers. And as I say, I think it's one of the most rich conversations we've had in the network ever. I'm hoping that people agree. And the last thing I want to do is advertise our next meeting, which I think will be of interest certainly to some of you. I don't know if Marguerite and or Cherie are still here.
Yes.
Because our next meeting is going to be hosted by Play Scotland. It's on the 6th of September. Marguerite, do you just want to say a couple of words?
Yep. We're delighted to be hosting, and I think this has been a very high bar to follow, Petra. So thank you for your wonderful hosting today. We are maybe having more of a focus specifically on children, young people and play, but I think the context we're looking at is that Gail's Penaloza quote that many of us use: if a community or a city is fit for an 8-year-old and fit for an 80-year-old, then it's fit for purpose for all of us. So I think we're going to try and look at that perspective in September. And I think just while a lot of you were speaking today, I thought it might be quite interesting to maybe see if we could bring on the Children's Wood in Glasgow to chat as well about their experience, because very much driven by children's use of that space. But it is a space for all generations, you know, with raised beds and storytelling and lots of different things going on that site, and doing some interesting project work with us on COP26 as well at the moment, Moth to a Flame. So look forward to seeing you all in September if we survive this summer.
Sorry, what was the date again, Pat?
6th of September. And Marguerite and I and Cherie will be talking obviously in the next while just to put that agenda together, and then we're sending out to people. If anybody isn't on our mailing list, you should all have my email address, or certainly if not, then Lenka will have my email address. So just get in touch and I'll make sure that you're on the list, and we'll be sending out information in the next while. And just otherwise, once again, many, many thanks to everybody, hosts, presenters, and all of you for coming along.
Thanks.
Thanks, Pat.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Lenka.
Thank you.